up the place, turn up the bass and make them all have fun. How we ablaze the fire, make it fun them. We mash up the place, turn up the bass and make some sound, boy run. And we will end your week just like a Sunday. We mash up the place, turn up the bass and make them all have fun. Skrillex ablaze the fire, make it fun them. We mash up the place, turn up the bass and make some sound, boy run. And we will end your week just like a Sunday.
In 2012, Ubisoft released Far Cry 3, a game that not only revitalized the franchise, but also redefined what players could expect from open-world shooters. It wasn't just the lush environments or explosive gameplay that made an impact. It was the psychological and thematic weight of the story. At its core, Far Cry 3 is a game about transformation, identity, and madness. It is a violent journey into the heart of a lawless jungle, a space where morality unravels and survival comes at a psychological cost. This essay just serves as a little retrospective on Far Cry 3. I'm going to dissect the story's structure and provide an analysis of its primary and supporting characters, and examine its central themes and evaluate both its narrative and gameplay strengths and weaknesses. And finally, we will consider the legacy of Far Cry 3 and how it shaped the future of the series and the future of storytelling in video games. Now, at the beginning of Far Cry 3, the protagonist, Jason Brody, is introduced as a privileged and carefree young man vacationing on the Rook Islands with friends, when their trip takes a turn for the worst. The group is captured by pirates, led by the volatile and unpredictable Vas Montenegro. Jason escapes with his brother Grant, but Grant is killed in the process, propelling Jason into a path of vengeance and self-discovery. Now, the narrative unfolds across two main arcs: Jason's evolution from an ordinary civilian to a ruthless warrior, as well as the unraveling of the power dynamics between Vas, Citra, and Hoyt. As Jason fights to rescue his friends, he becomes entangled in the local conflict between the native Rakyat and the pirates and mercenaries who dominate the island. Citra, who is the leader of the Rakyat, or Rakyat, to say that a little better, positions Jason as a messianic figure, I would say. Because I was about to say, like, positions him as a messiah, but it's more of a messiah-like figure, basically. A warrior of the people. A chosen one, if you will. Now, what's fascinating is how Jason's mission to save his friends becomes secondary to his actual personal awakening. The further he dives into the violence, the less connected he becomes to his old life. The game's dual endings offer a stark commentary on this shift. Does Jason return to his former self and leave the island? Or does he stay, fully embracing his new identity and committing a final act of violence against the ones he once loved? Now, Jason's arc is both compelling and disturbing. Initially overwhelmed and terrified, he quickly becomes proficient in the art of survival. This evolution is reflected in the game's mechanics. Players earn XP through violent acts, gain new skills via the Tatao tattoo system, and increasingly become more effective killers as the game goes on. Now, critics have debated whether Jason's transformation happens too rapidly to feel authentic. However, I think many players interpret this as sort of intentional commentary on the player's own desensitization in what's going on in the game. So the game subtly asks us, are you enjoying this transformation, or are you complicit in Jason's descent? Now, Vas is chaos personified, arguably one of the most iconic characters in the entire Far Cry franchise. Vas is a blend of charisma, menace, and unpredictability, played brilliantly by Michael Mando. Vas is more than just a villain. He's a thematic mirror to Jason. He represents what Jason could become if he lets go of all of his constraints. And Vas's monologues, particularly his speech about insanity, the iconic speech, is now legendary in gaming history.
Jumping out of airplanes, flying like birds. What do we have here? Grant, and Jason.
Welcome to a Manaki village.
From California, huh? Because you two white boys, you look very expensive. You're my bitch. I rule this fucking kingdom. Shut the fuck up, or you die.
And despite being killed halfway through the game, because technically Voss is the first villain, and then Hoyt is the secondary villain, Voss still leaves an incredible mark. Some critics argue that the narrative loses momentum after his departure, and that Hoyt, the second villain, lacks the psychological complexity that made Voss so compelling. So people tend to argue that should they have switched it around and sort of made Hoyt the underboss and then made Voss the main villain of the entire arc. But I kind of like how they positioned it, but I do agree to the extent that Hoyt should have been, they either should have made Hoyt bigger or just, you know, made Voss the main protagonist, but they positioned it how they decided to position it. Now, Citra is a complex character, alternatively portrayed as a revolutionary, but in reality she's a manipulator. She serves as both a love interest and a cult leader, pulling Jason further into the role of a mythical warrior. Her motivations remain ambiguous throughout. Does she genuinely believe in Jason's potential? Or is she simply using him to fulfill her own ends? The final decision? Whether to join her or reject her, forces players to confront how much of Jason's soul remains intact. And players tend to choose this in one of two ways, because they either choose it to follow the narrative to kind of show how far Jason has been lost, or they choose it because of thirst trap reasons, because, you know, Citra. But I will not delve further into that. And then lastly, Hoyt. Hoyt is, I would say, a far more conventional villain compared to Voss. He's a drug lord and a human trafficker. He represents systematic evil rather than the volatile, chaotic evil that Voss represented. Hoyt is more cold, he's more calculated by nature, and he's less theatrical, but still effective in showing how deeply entrenched the island's corruption is. And then Jason's infiltration into Hoyt's organization highlights themes of identity loss and moral compromise. Now, the famous quote from Voss, questioning the definition of insanity, sets the tone for the entire game. Throughout Jason's journey, the line between rationality and madness blurs. The game forces players to question what it means to lose oneself. Is insanity merely doing the same thing over and over? Or is it losing a sense of who you are? And one of the more controversial aspects of Far Cry 3 is its reliance on the white savior narrative. Jason, an outsider, becomes the champion of a native people, fulfilling prophecies and leading them to victory. And while the game does offer some subversion of this topic, particularly in the endings where Jason is punished or used, the execution leaves, a little room for critique. Because again, Citra's character and the lack of depth in the Rakyat people often leaves it feels like the backdrop is just an exotic set dressing rather than a fully realized culture. So again, I do feel like they should have gone a little more in depth in that and shown us more depth to those characters. But again, it's just a shooter, so we can't really complain because they gave us enough meat on the bones in the storytelling to sort of make up for the other parts that they lacked in. And again, Jason's transformation is not just physical, but also psychological. He grows to enjoy the violence, the power, the dominance. This raises compelling questions about what violence does to a person. At what point does survival become bloodlust? And the game never offers clear answers intentionally, making this all the more powerful. Now, Far Cry 3 plays with the idea of duality throughout. Freedom versus control. Order versus chaos. Self versus other. The player is constantly given choices that reflect these tensions. The two possible endings are a culmination of this journey, but some argue that the binary nature of the choice kind of undermines the nuance of Jason's character. The gameplay of Far Cry 3 is also integral to its narrative themes, because as players unlock new skills, craft new weapons, liberate outposts, they not only gain power in a mechanical sense, but they also embody Jace's descent into madness. This integration, in my opinion, is one of the game's greatest strengths. Because even though there's a bit of a tonal dissonance between the story and the gameplay, I think Ubisoft did this intentionally because it puts us in that blurred lines and confusion of how we're portraying Jason as psychologically torn in cutscenes, but then he's gleefully slaughtering people, dozens and dozens of people in gameplay, which is something that happens all the time, right, in games. Uncharted is another example where Nathan Drake is always constantly the happy-go-lucky guy in the cutscenes and everything, but in gameplay that's not what we're doing, that's not what we're portraying, like, so there's sort of like a disconnect. But I think Far Cry managed to make that disconnect tangible because we are seeing Jason's descent as it goes crazy, as the lines blur per se. Now, I think also the thrill of exploration and the emerging gameplay from all the encounters and the tactical freedom kind of made the game a benchmark of its time in 2012. I do know Far Cry is not as beloved anymore as much of Ubisoft's franchises, where they've sort of descended into a bit more generic storytelling, but this one still stands out as one of their better told games. And I think at the time, Far Cry 3 set a new standard for the series, and it inspired countless imitations. The narrative depth was good, the characters were memorable, and the philosophical ambition was ahead of its time in that mainstream AAA shooter space. I think further entries in the franchise attempted to replicate this formula, be it Far Cry 4, Far Cry 5, which I've also done a video about, and Far Cry 6, but none quite captured the same spark afterwards. None of them really hit the same as I would say Far Cry 3. And again, the game's use of a morally ambiguous protagonist and a charismatic villain influenced how other developers approach character-driven storytelling games. So Far Cry, was ahead of its time. Far Cry 3, that is. Now, just to conclude, I would say Far Cry 3 stands the test of time because it challenges players to look inwards. What does it mean to become a hero? Is heroism even possible in a world ruled by chaos and violence? Through Jason Brody's transformation, the game critiques not only its characters, but also the player's desire for power and control. Despite some of the narrative contradictions and the problematic stereotypes, I think Far Cry 3 overall remains a masterclass in atmospheric storytelling, character development, and thematic complexity. It's a game that dares to ask difficult questions and leaves players haunted long after the final credits roll. As Jason Brody stares into the jungle stares back. The question is, when you emerge from the trees, who are you now? Thank you again for tuning into another one of these brief essays. I hope to keep churning more of these out. I know I've been away from releasing a lot of them. I did have a release schedule for 2025, but now that I've managed to schedule all my other long plays, I've gotten into a rhythm where I'm able to release these essays a little more frequently. So you're going to be seeing a lot more of them piece by piece, and I hope to do Far Cry 4 next, and then I will probably tackle I may tackle the Hitman franchise after that, but we'll see how it goes. As always, stay safe, stay healthy, stay dangerous, stay blessed, and peace out.
Did I ever tell you the definition of insanity is? Insanity is doing the exact same fucking thing over and over again, expecting shit to change. That is crazy.
Right there. Imagine having to put down your own brother.
Oh my god.
Oh. Died last time. Come on, let's go. Woo. Let's go. It's those father-son moments again. Oh, but now Freya's here as well.
That if you just build great games, everything would turn around.
And then the great games point is the one that I wanted to argue against heavily, because what is the point of your console if it's not for games? Like, what is the point of having a console if you're just gonna do Game Pass and cloud gaming? Like